In study after study, money is often cited as one of the top conflict points in a marriage. Finances can be an emotional topic for couples, especially when money is tight. So it pays to get in the habit of discussing it on a regular basis, even if you keep separate finances. At stcumoney.org, find 6 tips for making the conversation easier.
Spokane listens when business talks. Welcome to Business Talks, the region's only local business talk show with your host, Ryan McNeice. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Now, let's get down to business with Business Talks.
Welcome to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeice, and we're here in the studio with Tom Hudson, the voice of the Zags. Thank you for being here.
Ryan, great to be here. I'm excited to start talking about basketball again.
I appreciate it. Well, there's plenty probably to talk about with the Zags, but let's jump back a little bit in your history and figure out what brought you to this point in your career.
You know, it was the funniest thing. I was in a situation, my first job, I worked in Grand Junction, Colorado. I'm from Texas, grew up in Texas, had every intention of moving back to Texas. I applied for a job up here. I actually forgot. I got a call about 2 months later, and I forgot who it was that I had applied with.
Right.
And I got a call, and the news director said, hey, you interested in a job? And I thought to myself, I've never been to the Northwest. It's like, I'm going to go up there for 2 years, and I'm going to go home. And here I am 20 years later. Yeah, I was like, I've never seen it. It's an adventure. It's going to be fun. And then 21 years later, I'm here and settled in, and it's been great, and then obviously with the Gonzaga thing, I started back in, 2002 was my first year, so we're moving into 16 years now, so yeah, it's been pretty amazing
well,
ride.
and that particular 16-year run is obviously extremely memorable and noteworthy.
It's been fantastic, and I tell people all the time, too, with my background in TV, I've seen every single game during this run, which has been, remarkable. I've been so fortunate, and I think that's part of what ended up keeping me here originally, before I found out that I really loved this area, was the sports were so good and there was so much success, and there were some great stories to tell, and then getting on with Gonzaga and having the opportunity to do the radio, such great people, and it's a great school. There are a lot of things you can really kind of rally behind and really enjoy, and Coach Few's been fantastic, everybody in the entire athletics department, so it's been a great ride.
Well, it's been fun to rally behind him as a community in general. I'm a Zag myself, and I actually can throw back went to a team basketball camp. Coach Few is a grad assistant at the time. That actually takes us back, unfortunately, quite a while. But let's even go further back. You went to University of Denver University in broadcasting, bachelor's in broadcasting, ended up kind of cutting your teeth in high school sports, I believe, in Grand Junction, Colorado. If you look back at those days, high school sports and where you started out, how did that affect you as you move into big-time college sports at this point?
Well, to be honest, it was kind of funny because that was, my first job had originally been in TV, and then we actually did we were an ABC affiliate. We had Monday Night Football back then still. Okay. So we did a high school, and we had a Division II school there, Mesa State. So we did a half-hour football show leading into Monday Night Football, and there was a guy, his name was Jim Davis, who called most of the games on the radio, and Jim's still in Grand Junction, and I owe so much to him. He's such a great guy that gave me an opportunity. And, he said, we had him on. He was our, kind of main picks, and we'll talk about the games a little bit. He said, hey, you want to come and help out? We'll have you call a game or two here and there. And, so it went from, sitting there, you're sometimes on a telephone because nothing else is working, and trying to find rosters. I mean, this is way back before internet and, all the other stuff. And so, you're trying to figure out a team would come over from Denver, and you have no idea who any of the kids are, and you're trying to piece it together and maybe talking to the parents and say, hey, who's number 12, before you're going on.
And when you mentioned time before internet, some of our listeners are probably that existed. There was a time before internet?
Yes, yeah, and you talk about dating yourself. I worked in a place where we actually used typewriters before. And so and the AP wire literally was the wire coming down on the printer. So so it was an interesting start, and then when I moved up here at the time, the affiliations were all different, and so even though that's what I had loved to do was calling games. I didn't really have the opportunity, and so I was not really sure if that was going to present itself again. Right. And then when the GU thing came up, and what a fantastic opportunity to jump back in. Yeah, and I think I'm fortunate, obviously, with the background that I had. That was high school, and then Junior College World Series is played down in Grand Junction, so I had some baseball experience there. But it was great to be able to get in and get going.
And then from there, the springboard was Crim 2 and sports director here in Spokane. And your story, as you noted, that you potentially came to Spokane thinking this won't be long-term, and then you end up staying, that actually, interestingly, parallels a lot of the Gonzaga basketball players throughout the history in which you've been calling, that a lot of folks I've sat down with, Matt Santangelo, et cetera, say a very similar compliment to Spokane, which is, I wasn't going to stay here. Foxy, Richard Fox, he says the same thing. I wasn't going to stay in Spokane. But all of a sudden, 4 years, that real family feel of Spokane, banding behind the players, and of course you're following the team all year long. You see that. Spokane ends up being home.
I think it's really fascinating, and I think it's been fascinating to see even as the years have kind of gone on. Where, like you said, I mean, the players, they come into town and there's nothing going on here, and I'm leaving. To then kind of see, and as the years have gone on, you see how Spokane, I think, is growing and positive things are happening here. The only thing for me has been the winter. Still after all these years of being out of Texas, so if I could cut a month off of winter, it'd be great. But I think the guys have seen it, and then I think to see what I think's really neat is to see how involved these guys still are. And you go back to the guys that that played with Matt, the guys on the '99 team that broke through, that are all pretty much in town. I mean, 4 or 5 of those guys are still here, and more keep coming back. Derek Rivio just moved back to town. Mike Hart is here. Derek just retired and he moved back, and Mike Hart has moved back. He's out of coaching, but he's getting into the business world. So even these young guys keep jumping in now, seeing what's going on here. So it's been really neat to see, and neat to see those guys continue to support the program. And I think too, you saw it so much the Final Four. How many of those guys came back, and how involved they were with everything going on.
Well,
down there
that's
in
where
Phoenix.
the loyalty really shows. I had an opportunity to, and obviously you were there too. In March down Salt Lake, I was able to go to that game, so that was a lot of fun to see the massive support for Gonzaga, and this run was just incredible. What a great run.
It was, and I have been telling people, the highlight of my professional career without a doubt. I mean, what a phenomenal run, and it was like 1999 all over again.
Right.
It felt like there was an excitement again, and I had an opportunity. The guy that works at Syracuse, who's a great guy, and I've known him over the years. He sent me an email after after we won and made it to the Final Four, and he said, "Hey, congratulations! You're going to have the time of your life calling these games."
Oh yeah.
He said, "Hey, but it's going to get really busy really fast." And sure enough, a couple hours after we'd gotten home, I'm getting emails and calls. Hey, can you come on and talk and do this? And I thought it was really interesting because the narrative about Gonzaga seemed to change, and that was kind of what I kept saying to people. I said, all we had heard was this team can't make it, or this program isn't good enough, or they're lucky and they play in a small conference and they get in the tournament and they can never make it. Yeah, and then you look at it and you say, okay, so we broke through and we made it to the Final Four, and instead of people talking about what we haven't done, they started talking about what we have done. When you look at 8 Sweet 16s in 16 years, and you look at making the Elite Eight now, 3 times, and you've done that 2 of the last 3 years, and all of a sudden I think people's perception started to change a little bit.
Absolutely.
So I think it was fun to see again the excitement in Spokane, and then people maybe, instead of every time that you're answering a question, it's not trying to defend why we haven't been there or what's going on. It's been like, hey, you know what?
Yeah, did you see
what
we just did?
This is pretty good.
Right. Well, I thought last year I heard an interview with Mark Few, and it really resonated with me where he made the comment similar to what you said, is we were expected to go this far, that folks were seeing year in and year out, which is amazing in and of itself in terms of WCC championships over and over and over, and making it deep into March Madness. But his comment was, but people are expecting that. We need to go one step further, and that was before, of course, they did it. And I was so happy to see just that continual push and perseverance, and they did it. It was phenomenal.
It was, and I was excited to see that too, because I think the one thing that I get an opportunity to see a lot of times is you see the behind-the-scenes stuff. And you see how much work goes into it, and you see all the preparation, and you know how hard everybody works. And to hear people, it gets a little frustrating. To hear people say, "Well, you're no good," or you choke, or you never win the big games, and you do all stuff. And you look back over the history. I mean, Mark Few's won 81% of his games.
Which is unheard of.
Yeah, and won some big ones. And then I think, too, people look at that big picture and say, well, you've been there, this many years in a row, and you've never made it to the Final Four. Well, sometimes those teams weren't necessarily expected to make these runs, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, you're an 11 seed or you're a 12 seed, you're not supposed to make the Final Four. That's not how it works. The top 4 seeds are supposed to make it.
Well, in sports, people like yourself, you can go back example after example. Kansas in the late 80s, that's why they're the Cinderella team. That's what makes March Madness that's what's so exciting for the fans.
Exactly, and I think that's what early on captured everyone's imagination about Gonzaga, and
Absolutely.
then and mostly it's funny because mostly it's the big conference people that
Sure.
are that you laugh at because well, hey, I always used to joke when Adam Morrison was on his wonderful run, him and JJ Redick were battling for the scoring championship. Did a lot of interviews back then and be like, well, you guys don't play anybody. And it's safe. Well, it's like, well, first of all, Michigan State, Washington when they were really good,
right.
Memphis when they were really good. And then it was also, if it's so easy, why aren't other guys doing it?
Exactly. There's plenty of other divisions.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with the programs. Like if it's so easy to do what Gonzaga has done over these last 20 years, why isn't it being repeated? And I think that's what makes the story so unique is that they, coming from nowhere and sustaining it for 2 decades has been phenomenal.
Well, obviously a GU fan myself, it's phenomenal what they've been able to accomplish. Let's go back and take a look at what type of preparation do you do in terms of, this is a busy schedule for you. Summers probably have a little more freedom in terms of scheduling, but when the early season starts kicking off, the obligations on your part really kick in. So walk us through what this means for you professionally and being a part of the Zags.
Well, it's kind of funny. It's almost for me like a teacher schedule. Once basketball ends, then I get into baseball, and then sometime in June, I wrap up for a few months, and then it's actually funny because I feel like the Zag Golf Classic, which just happened, is kind of the tip off to when I start to get a little bit busy. We've got the night with Gonzaga basketball. It's coming up October 3rd at Anthony's, and then on the 7th is Craziness in the Kennel. So now it kind of starts to kick in. So about right now I start looking. The magazines start coming out. So there's some more articles and stuff kind of going on. With my young kids, sometimes it's difficult. Try to get over to practice as much as you can and see what's going on with the team and kind of how they're coming along. And then as we get into the season, there's a lot of prep, and it's different. Again, we go back to when I first started, and not a lot of internet coverage, and not a lot of great websites from the schools where you were scrambling for information, and and you were actually looking for a sports page from a local newspaper. We'd get into town, and and you go and kind of start looking through that stuff. So it's changed quite a bit that you have access not to just the information, but also to video.
Right.
Where there are times now where you can get on, you can watch a team play, so you're a little more familiar with who their personnel are and kind of what they do, so that you're maybe a little more prepared. Trying to figure out, make sure that that the guy that's left-handed is left-handed. And I've heard horror stories, and thank goodness it never happened to me. But oh my gosh, this guy's making left-handed shots. Like, well, he's left-handed.
You're
so
like, that guy's darn near ambidextrous.
Yeah, exactly,
if
right.
He wasn't left-handed.
Yes, exactly.
Tom, let's take a short break and come right back with Tom Hudson, voice of the Zags. Thank you so much.
You're listening to SpokaneTalksOnline.com, Spokane and North Idaho's business and community talk station.
If you're like many shoppers, you love to find a deal online. Or you shop online because it's so convenient. And you probably know thieves love to go online too, to try to steal shoppers' credit card information. When you're shopping online, you can start protecting your credit card information by investigating the website you're shopping on. Make sure the online retailer lists a real phone number and a physical address. Read the site's privacy policy and search for reviews and ratings of the retailer. You can read more about safe shopping online at STCU's financial education blog. Go to stcumoney.org.
Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.
To help you be safe, Washington state law requires you to call 811 2 full business days before you plan, for example, to dig, drill, plow, pull from, or pound anything into the ground. Be prepared to provide the operator with the correct address, cross street, and a description of your work. You must mark the dig area with white paint. The operator will inform you of the utilities notified of your impending excavation. Wait for all their marks. Be safe and dig with care.
Welcome back to Business Talks. I'm Ryan McNeice, and we're here in the studio with Tom Hudson, the voice of the Zags. thank you, Tom, for being here. I know this time of year is busy schedule for you with all the new news coming out about Gonzaga and the upcoming team. Right before we left for break, we were talking about what's really interesting to me is really what makes someone like yourself and or this type of profession tick. What does your day look like? I don't think it's probably common knowledge as to how being a broadcaster for a top 25 team, I'm going to say top 2 team last year. Let's just go straight to the top.
Right.
But give us some more insight on once the season kicks off, whether it be home games and then separately away games, what does that schedule, what does a day look like for you?
Well, for me, it's interesting, when we start at the beginning of the week, if we want to do that, start on Mondays. And, we do the Coach Few show every Monday afternoon from noon to 1. We're in his office. And so, that Monday morning is a little bit hectic, kind of trying to, make sure I've got everything back and kind of together.
Yep.
We try to do player interviews. I'll also try to interview, somebody maybe, the radio guy from the opposing team we're going to play that week. So, you're kind of getting your stuff in a row and making sure that that goes pretty good. And then, during the week, it's really kind of interesting. I mean, once you get into league, it's a pretty, regular, because you're playing every Thursday and Saturday.
Exactly. Fairly consistent.
Yes, it gets very consistent. In the preseason, and, the interesting things are, the preseason tournaments.
Right.
I mean, when you look at them, last year we're in Orlando and you're calling 3 games in 3 days, and so it's a lot of quick turnaround, and what you're trying to do, for me, it's probably, people ask me a lot, how much prep do you put in?
Exactly.
I would say it's probably, depending how much video you're watching, if you're watching video, probably 6 to 8 hours a game, really wanting to know.
6 to 8 hours per game.
Per game, yeah, that's probably about the number, maybe a little more early on when you don't know the teams as well. But like I said, you maybe watch a game, and then, making sure you've got the numbers right, and making sure, who's hurt and who isn't. Most guys do, you've got a chart that, that you personalize, and so for mine, you've got, number, height, weight, obviously the guy's name, and maybe, how he's playing right now, or where he's a McDonald's All-American, whatever that stuff is. So you've got that in front of you, but
you got
for
your
me,
basic foundational facts
exactly. But I want to make sure that I've got enough of that kind of in my mind so that I'm not looking down at a piece of paper while, somebody's making a shot,
exactly.
And so.
Well, I love your example about the left-hander, or, man, this guy's great from the left side.
Sure,
exactly. Left-handed.
Exactly. And then the part of that too that's kind of fun is, when you say something and it actually kind of happens, that's actually kind of fun too. Every so often you get lucky, but no. So I think that's the biggest thing, for me, is to make sure that I'm prepared.
Yep.
And one of the interesting things that I always tell people that are trying to get in the business, that'll ask, you maybe, of all of that preparation time, you might leave 80 or 90% of what you actually studied, in your mind. I mean, you don't use it because you don't want to force, things.
But you didn't know where you were going to go.
Exactly.
You had to have the breadth, if you will, there.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And where the game is going, right? And so, everybody wants to have storylines, and I know that's the big thing now. They want storylines and this, and then they'll force that storyline, down your throat, regardless of if that's really what's playing out. For me, it's a little bit of, okay, yeah, this guy's supposed to be good, but he's not having a good game. So we're not going to keep talking about how great he is. I mean, let's talk about he's usually a really good player, but he's struggling. Or what is Gonzaga doing to this guy who's scoring 20 points a game to make him not score 20 points a game tonight?
That concept actually kind of fascinates me, that there is kind of a built-in trying to weave a storyline into it, because I think that is a lot of times what the fans are interested in. What comes to mind to me is the Olympics. I think that is the epitome of, it's about the story. The 100-yard sprint might be, 9 seconds long, but the rest of the story.
What's absolutely, and I think it's interesting too, being with Gonzaga, because people get to know our stories relatively quickly. I mean, we knew that Nigel, he transferred, and that he had done this and he had done that, and everybody knew about Shem and his back injury and the whole deal.
Right.
So it's kind of a funny thing of trying to tell the stories maybe of some of the kids from the other teams and make people understand, hey, this, I know they're 8-20, but I have to tell you, these are the 2 or 3 guys that may, be good enough to maybe help them, beat us. And, a lot of people kind of roll their eyes. That's not going to happen. You're like, yeah, well, this is kind of who they are. Or, hey, this kid comes from this place, and try to make it interesting from that standpoint. But you're also, having to remember that, that it's our school that we're talking about. And for me, because I'm around it so much and you're calling every single game, I get a little bit leery of telling Shemik's backstory every single game, because everybody knows. Yes, exactly.
But that's interesting, because it's very relevant to somebody tuning in for the first time that particular game.
And
how many don't know?
Yes, exactly.
There's a lot of loyal Gonzaga fans that might have heard that story 10 times, but it's relevant.
Ryan, you hit the nail on the head, because that's the thing that, somebody will, I didn't know that, or I hadn't heard that. And so that's,
that keeps you being consistent, if you will.
Yes. And so you do talk about stuff a lot. And then, for us, it's great to tell our stories, because one of the things that I think has been so fantastic about the Gonzaga story to this point is the type of kids that Coach Few and his staff have recruited over the years. I mean, they bring in really solid kids, and they've got great stories to tell. And then if they'll bring in a kid maybe from a background that's a little bit different, it's wonderful how they prop these kids up and really give them an opportunity to be successful, and not just in basketball but in life.
Right.
And I think I tell people all the time. I think Jeremy Pargo's story is one of the great Gonzaga stories. I mean, a phenomenal kid who came from inner city Chicago. The education system there wasn't great. He was able to come here. He was able to get his degree, turn into an amazing basketball player. He's a fantastic human being. He comes back every summer, and you see him.
Yeah.
And I think those are the cool stories, along with the other guys we talk about that that come in that maybe come from good schools. The stories are fantastic, I think, on both sides of it. But they've done such a great job of bringing in good people.
Well,
they're great stories to tell.
And to me, as someone in the community, I think that's what is so important. Of course, we like to see wins. Who doesn't? And it's so fun to be excited about March Madness as things get more and more exciting through the end of the season, and Gonzaga's there. But what stood out to me last year is my son had an opportunity around Christmas time to go to a Gonzaga basketball camp. He was 9 years old at the time, and I walk away from that because those players were absolutely wonderful to all age ranges. That means a lot. That means a lot here in Spokane. And despite the fact that they're in the national championship game, that's actually what I think means a lot.
And I agree, absolutely. And they're fantastic kids. And, one of the things that Coach Few will tell you very begrudgingly, like himself, and you kind of have to pull it on, because they do a lot of stuff that doesn't get publicity.
Right.
They'll go to an elementary school and they'll
Right.
talk to kids, and they don't invite the media to show up with their cameras and say,
Right.
hey, look at us, we're doing wonderful things.
They're just doing it.
There are opportunities where, Coach Few has brought people in that maybe are facing some adversity. They get to come into practice and meet the players, and the players are all, fantastic with the people that come in, and nobody ever hears about it, nobody
Right.
ever knows it. And like you said, like with the basketball camps, I mean, that's not the first time I've heard that story,
Right.
But it's not this, hugely publicized
Right.
thing of how wonderful the
They're
guys
not
are with the
making
kids.
that a media play.
Right.
And I think circling back to what you said very important earlier is that folks don't realize that just what goes on during those two halves, that's not the whole story. There's so much that goes into making this team. These guys are full-time students.
Yes.
I think people forget that. They don't realize this isn't professional basketball. It just looks like it.
No, exactly. It does. And it is, I think, when you look at the rigors of the academic part, Coach Few always talks about it. He says, hey, they're competing in the classroom against some of the best students in the country. And I mean,
Right.
Gonzaga's no slouch,
No,
right? I mean,
no,
it's a tough school. And so, it is. And I think there is a balancing act there. And there is, making sure that, they're taking care of their grades and making sure that's all done. And like you said, so that's part of the behind the scenes, you show up to practice at 2:00 and
Right.
you've got to be ready to practice. I mean, you're playing at, like you said, your top 2 team last year. I mean, you're playing at a really high level, so you've got to be ready for that part of it. But then you also have to be, performing in the classroom. So there is a lot that goes on.
And a Herculean schedule. You got, as you indicated, once you get into season, Tuesday night, Thursday night, or in the early season, Orlando for 3 or 4 days. And by the way, you got a whole slate of classes all week long.
Yes.
So you start your week off, you're doing your show with Coach Few. You get into that Tuesday first game during season. You're prepping 6 to 8 hours per game. Significant schedule.
Yeah, it is, and it's fun. It's enjoyable work. I have people tell me, you don't know how lucky you are. I say, yes, actually, I do know how lucky I am. I've got my dream job. I do.
Right.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. I love what I do. It's a lot of fun. So, a lot of times that 6 to 8 hours is pretty easy.
Right.
And you'll maybe break it up in chunks sometimes.
Right.
When we're on the road, I'll hop on the plane, and you've got a few hours away from the kids and kind of the craziness, and able to do some of that work there. And then game days are really interesting because it's the same thing. The players, you're going through walkthroughs, and there's a team meal, and and again for us, we don't travel with an engineer, so I kind of serve as as the engineer a little bit. So
you wear a couple different hats.
Yes, you're making sure that the equipment works wherever we are, and and there's a little bit of stress in that depending on where we are sometimes. And so it is interesting, and there are so you have that day that's a big prep day, and then game day turns a little bit, and then we're there. We have an hour-long pregame show. So we might get to the game 2 2.5 hours, depending on where we are, before the game even starts.
Okay, and that was one of my questions, is that collaboration with the rest of your team.
Yeah, and so we get there early, and you make sure that everything's set up, and then then you're trying to talk to maybe some assistant coaches that that you've gotten over the years, or the sports information directors for the schools. A lot of them in the WCC have been around for a long time, and you establish some great relationships. You talk to. I try to be as forthcoming with our information with the other radio guys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you talk to them and say, hey, this is what's going on. You're not going to see him tonight because you hate to see somebody come in, because it's happened before where you prep and you think this guy's going to be a big part of the game for the other team, and then the game starts and the guy's not on the floor. Now, it doesn't happen as much as it used to.
You're like, I just did an hour of prep for his story.
Yeah, exactly.
Where is he?
Exactly. And so you try to make sure that you talk to people that know what's going on. And like I said, you make relationships. For me, it's been a long time I've been doing it. So you've met some people, and maybe try to talk to them a little bit, and see what's going on. See what's going on at the school. Are they doing new developments? Kind of what's going on, so you can share some of that. And then when it gets going, that hour before the game, there's there's some pretty decent structure to it.
Yeah.
Once the game gets going,
then it's truly
you're
game
just
time.
going. Yeah, and you're a lot of it is just feel, and you're kind of flying. And like I said, that for me is if you're prepared, it's a lot easier to go. And that's the part that goes pretty quick, even though it's the longest part of the broadcast. And then we're on post game for about 45 minutes to an hour. With post game interviews with the assistant coach and and one of the players, and and going over the highlights again, and maybe looking ahead to the next game a little bit. We'll try to recap what the women have done. When they're playing on the same nights, and so it's a busy day. I mean, our broadcast day, by the time we're from the time we walk into the gym, first one's in a lot of times and last one's out a lot of times.
Sure.
I mean, you might be 6 hours, 7 hours that you're in the gym, or that you're traveling from the hotel there. So they're busy days. They're exhausting days when you finish, because you've put so much into it. For us, I think the fun part is that I have a vested interest.
Absolutely.
I see our guys and I see our coaches. I know how hard they work and I know what they do. So you are emotionally invested, maybe more than the national guy that comes in and calls the game and then goes back and gets a quick nap and then gets on his plane and goes to the next game. And so that's one thing I've been asked a couple times. Would you ever consider doing that stuff? It's fun for me to have an interest. It's fun to really be invested in what the team's doing and what's going on. So those are great days. Now I will say, when we get into league, you really start to know teams.
Right.
By the time we get to Vegas for the league tournament, it's like, okay, hey, we're playing Santa Clara for the third time this year. Okay, and the thing that's nice about the WCC, there doesn't seem to be a ton of turnover with all of this transfer stuff that's been going on. So kids are there for 3 or 4 years for the most part, at least the guys that are playing quite a bit. So you have an idea from year to year. Most of their key guys. They had a few freshmen, but the prep time goes down as we get into league play, and that second time around seeing teams, you get a little bit of a breather.
Well, as we close out, what can we expect from the Zags this year?
I think this
early speculation.
I think this team's going to be a little bit better. I mean, the coaches obviously not better than what we were last year, but better maybe than what they're saying. No, you can't lose the guys we lost with Shemek and with Nigel, and then Zach Collins, and Jordan Matthews. I mean, those are tough players to lose. I think we're going to be okay. The schedule's pretty good. With we're going to the PK 80 in Portland, which is honoring Phil Knight. We'll play Ohio State first. And then you've got Creighton, you've got Villanova, San Diego State, UW. So there'll be some pretty tough games in the early schedule. I think what's going to be interesting to see, college sports are so unique compared to pro sports, because everybody's going to say, hey, they played for the national championship last year. Well, no, we didn't really. The team that played last year and the team that played this year are two different teams.
They had similar names on the jersey.
Exactly. Yeah. But the expectation, every time you step on the floor, the team is going to be playing against the team that played for the national championship last year. And hopefully this group, and I think they will, have the maturity to understand that people are coming after you even harder than they have in the past, which has been pretty hard, because
they're truly gunning for you.
They think they're going to get you.
Well, what we can definitely depend on is Spokane's going to be behind the Zags, and we're excited for another season. Thank you so much,
Brian,
Tom.
Thanks so much.
I
Great to be here.
Thank
Absolutely.
You.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.
Business Talks is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Ask a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com. Business Talks is brought to you by our friends at STCU and Well Dressed Walrus. Business Talks wishes you good business and a good day.
If you're like many shoppers, you love to find a deal online. Or you shop online because it's so convenient. And you probably know thieves love to go online too, to try to steal shoppers' credit card information. When you're shopping online, you can start protecting your credit card information by investigating the website you're shopping on. Make sure the online retailer lists a real phone number and a physical address. Read the site's privacy policy and search for reviews and ratings of the retailer. You can read more about safe shopping online at STCU's financial education blog. Go to stcumoney.org.
Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.